Okay, so hopefully you had a chance to try number 8 on your own. And if you haven't, maybe just pause this video before you see if you get the right answer. Okay, so on part A, right, we're asked to, subtract f minus g of x. And so there's not a ton that you need to do here. You could just do 8x minus 2x to the 5 over 6. Okay, you don't need to simplify that any further. Part B, you're just asked to multiply those two functions. This one you can simplify a little bit more, okay? And what do I mean by that? Well, you can multiply the coefficients. 8 times 2 is 16. When you have exponents that are different or they're same, right? But notice you have the same base, right? X times x to the 5 over 6. You simply add the exponent. This exponent right here is a 1, okay? So you add it to 5 over 6, and you can simplify that to 16x to the 11 over 6. Okay, so that would be the final answer for this. Final answer to part A. And then part C, you're asked to divide, so 8x divided by 2x to the 5 over 6. And I would ask you to simplify this even further, right? 8 over 2 is 4. And again, this exponent right here is a 1. When you're dividing, right, the quotient is basically the numerator exponent minus the denominator exponent. Okay, so again, properties of exponents, that's the skill that's being asked here. And your final answer is just 4x to the 1/6. Okay, so B and C require a little bit of properties of exponents. And then part D, we need to find the domain. All right, so find the domain of A, B, C, and D. Okay, so before we find the domain of A, B, C, and D, right, we need to find the domain of F. Domain of F, right? And we also need to state the domain of G. And we have to see the overlap, okay? So that's the procedure. Domain of F, right? F of x is just a linear function, and that's just going to be all real. The domain of G, okay, so this is the part where I think you guys might have a little bit of trouble with. But remember this, if I rewrite it as G, right, this number right here represents the root. So it's the 6th root of x to the 5th, right? And so again, this is an even root function. And the way you find the domain of an even root function, right, is you set the argument greater than or equal to 0. Okay, so x to the 5th. Actually, you know what? I'm going to rewrite this. X to the 5th is greater than or equal to 0. If you test this on the number line, right, this is a polynomial inequality. If you test -1 over here, you're going to get -1. Sorry, this is f of x. If you take -1 to the 5th, -1 to the 5th is just -1. -1 is greater than, or sorry, -1 to the 5th is -1. So in this region right here, this is going to be negative. If you plug in +1 over here, right, 1 to the 5th, that's positive. Okay, so the domain, right, is just x is greater than or equal to 0, which is just 0 to infinity. Okay, so again, you have a 6th root function. I had a quadratic / polynomial inequality. I tested on the number line. I got the x-intercepts, and this is the region, right? X is greater than or equal to 0, or 0 to infinity. Okay. All right, so this will be the domain of G. All right, so to answer part A, right, once you have these two guys, right, I don't even need to look at what I wrote in part A. I need to find the domain of, f minus g of x, right? So it's just the overlap of these two, and the overlap of minus infinity to infinity and 0 to infinity with bracket is just 0 to infinity. For part B, the domain of this, right, I don't need to even look. I just know it's the overlap of these two. The only time you need to look is when you divide, okay? And we'll get to that. So this one's also 0 to infinity. Okay, and then part C, this is the part where you have to be careful, okay? So remember, part C was f over g of x, right? And basically, we need to include or exclude, right? Include that g of x cannot equal to 0, okay? So what's my g of x function? My g of x function is this, 2x to the 5 over 6. We know this cannot equal to 0. So if you solve it, right, x to the 5 over 6 cannot equal to 0. You take the 6th root of both sides. You are going to get x cannot equal 0, basically. All right, so the answer for part C is, I take a look at what I have in A and B, right? It's basically the same thing, 0 to infinity. The only thing I need to change is change it because it can't equal 0, right? Can't equal 0. I just need to change this guy right here, this bracket, into a parenthesis. So 0 to infinity would be my final answer for part C. Okay, so the domain is very, very, it's important because not everything is allowed into your functions, right? And domain is a set of input values for which your function is defined. Okay. All right, so that will be number 8. And I think there's one more problem. Let's go over number 9. So again, hopefully you had a chance to try number 9 on your own. You're going to get f of x is equal to x over x plus 5. And g of x is equal to x to the 4th. Okay. All right. So for part A, right, we're asked to subtract. So not a ton of operations or not a ton of things I'm going to do right here. I'm just going to leave it like this. Okay. How do I know when to simplify? I'll let you know. Okay. The textbook basically left it like this in the answer key. Part B, I'm asked to multiply. So if I'm asked to multiply this one, you can multiply this, right? X to the 1st times x to the 4th. You could simplify that to x to the 5th. And then part C, right, you are asked to divide. F of x divided by g of x basically means I multiply by the reciprocal. And so you're going to have this, x over x to the 4th over x plus 5. You can cancel this out right here and call it x. This x will cancel out. You can call it 1 over x cubed, x plus 5. Okay. So I know it's a little bit tricky, like when do I simplify, when do I not? I will be specific on a quiz or test, okay? I'm just trying to format the answers the way your textbook does it. All right, so hopefully A, B, and C was not too strenuous. Again, the tricky part is always the domain, okay? So again, hopefully by the, I think this is the 4th example, you're starting to get it, right? For me to find the domain of f of x minus g of x, which is part A, and the domain of f of x times g of x, and for part C, right, I need to find the domain of each separately. Domain of f. So over here, right, the domain of f basically include all values, right, all x cannot equal negative 5, okay? So all x cannot equal negative 5 would be minus infinity to negative 5, union mark, negative 5 to infinity. The domain of g, this is a polynomial functions. Polynomial functions, the domain is just all real. All right, so for part A, you already have the answer. It's the overlap of domain of f and domain of g, okay? So you don't look at the final answer, you just look at the overlap. The overlap of this and this is just minus infinity to negative 5, union mark, negative 5 to infinity. The domain of part B, all right, is also going to be the overlap of the domain of f and g. So it's the same exact answer. Minus infinity to negative 5, parentheses, union mark, negative 5 to infinity, union mark. All right, now C is the tricky one, right? You basically have to include, right, on top of this, include that g of x cannot equal to 0. So whatever you got for A and B, just add the fact that g of x can't equal to 0. And what was my g of x? X to the 4th. Okay, so g of x, which is x to the 4th, right? G of x, right, cannot equal to 0. Okay, so quickly solve that. If you take the 4th root of both sides, you're going to get x can't equal to 0. So if I have this answer right here from part A and B, right, and I just include that x can't equal to 0, how would I write it? I would write it like this. Minus infinity to -5, right? Union mark, -5 to 0, right? And then union mark 0 to infinity. Basically, this is saying all x cannot equal -5, cannot equal 0. Okay? That's what this is in interval notation. Okay, so I know this looks a little bit tricky, but hopefully you get the idea after doing 4 examples. And again, if you have any questions, feel free to email me or come into